Welcome, everyone. My name is Ari Greenblatt, and I'm the host of Nonlinear, a podcast where we connect ambitious high schoolers to successful individuals from all different professions, hearing their nonlinear paths to the top. Today's guest is Adlai Wertman, the professor of social entrepreneurship at USC. Professor Wertman is the founding director of the Brittingham Social Enterprise Lab at Marshall, a university-wide center focused on educating and supporting USC students, faculty, staff, and community members on using business models to address global, social, environmental, and health challenges. Professor Wertman is also the academic director of the USC Warren Bennett Scholars Leadership Program, as well as a senior fellow at the USC Price Center on Social Innovation. Prior to joining the faculty at Marshall, Professor Wertman spent 7 years as president and CEO of Chrysalis, the only nonprofit in Los Angeles devoted solely to helping the homeless change their lives through employment. Prior to Chrysalis, Adlai spent 18 years as a senior investment banker in New York and Los Angeles. He earned his bachelor's in economics from the State University of New York at Stony Brook and his MBA in finance, public policy management, and strategic planning from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Wertman, it's an honor to have you on the show.
It's an honor to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Professor Wertman, where are we talking to you from right now?
Los Angeles, Pacific Palisades in LA. It's
Okay.
a beautiful, beautiful little town between Santa Monica and Malibu. I'm blessed to be here.
Wonderful. So, Adlai, this show is for high schoolers and for young people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were like when you were in high school?
I was a punk. I was a guy who I played every sport there was. And I also started working when I was 11 years old. So I've always held a couple of jobs in my life. So
What sports did you play growing up?
my biggest sport was soccer, but I lived in a neighborhood in Queens, and whatever season it was is what we played. Everything from basketball to stickball to soft tackle, you name it, we played it.
That's great. I play a ton of sports myself, and I love to play soccer. I play goalie, and I used to play center back.
I was a halfback, a lot of
Okay.
running.
A lot of running. Um, I'm just super interested because most of the guests on this show haven't started working as young as you did. What were you doing at age 11?
My first job, I'll go through this real quick. It should be my pre-college resume. My first job was delivering newspapers, something that on a bicycle, which in New York, which is a thing in the weather. I then put together a group of kids and we delivered penny savers, which were these sort of flyers. I worked in a bowling alley. I worked in a poster store. I worked in a tropical fish store. And I worked at something called a tennis bubble, which is these inflatable things that they put over tennis courts so that people can play in the bad weather. And that was about it. Just a few jobs.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you were getting after it. I don't know what I was doing at 11. Something with lemonade stands. I don't know. But tell me, Adlai. So after high school, you go on to college. Can we talk a little bit about your college experience? That being, some of the internships that you did. What year were you working when you were in college? And also, what were you majoring in, and what were you planning on doing in the future?
Sure. So first, I was majoring in. I started off. I went there as a engineering student because I was good at math, and my dad was an engineer and wanted me to be an engineer. Both of my brothers were not good at math. I hated engineering. I could do engineering, but I couldn't do physics. I could do math, but I couldn't do physics. Calculus in my sleep, I couldn't understand vectors. So I left that and became what's called an econometrics major. So the entirely math side of economics and statistics put together. I did it all with absolutely no idea what I was going to do after graduation, but we talk about that later. I, at school, was involved in a ton of things. I was school of the 70s, and there's a joke that says, if you can remember the 70s, you weren't there. So, we certainly had fun in school, without a doubt, of the days I can remember. we were the second largest producer and the third largest producer of concerts in New York.
Wow.
And I ran concert security. I was also an RA my senior year. My friends and I owned 5 foosball tables and 2 cigarette machines on campus. That
And
it was a steady passive income.
that sounds good. That sounds good. I might have to like maybe think about that when I go to college.
Yeah, I think the
Um,
foosball tables were great. Mostly just I just wanted to play free foosball. That's all.
yeah. No, I love a good football game. Um, so
Yeah.
Adlai, you graduated from Wharton and you went straight to Wall Street. So you told
No,
me
I
before.
actually no. I mean, I went to Wall Street straight out of undergrad,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I went and I worked on Wall Street for 4 years. Then I went back and got my MBA at Wharton. Then I went back to Wall Street.
Uh-huh. hmm So where did you have that change in mind that made you want to go into working on Wall Street?
I didn't. I accidentally got a job on Wall Street. So I had never given a thought to what I would do after graduation. Like literally didn't think about it. Um, and at graduation, a professor told me to see his friend at the mall. I was like, I know I went to a state school, but the mall, really? He was like, just go. So I went the day after graduation, don't remember it at all. And then I got a call 2 days later that I should go downtown and meet this guy for an interview. I didn't know where I was going, what I was interviewing for. I had no idea. I was a working class Jewish kid from Queens. We didn't know what Wall Street was or anything. I mean, it was just outside of what I knew.
Hmm
And then I walked into this office in downtown, literally the New York Stock Exchange building, and walked into a place where it reeked of wealth. I mean, wood paneled walls and marble floors and pictures of horses and stuff, and
hmm
people smoking cigars, wearing 3-piece suits. And then I got my first job because when I got asked the question, why do I want to do this, by the guy who was interviewing me, and I didn't know what this was. I really still didn't know what I was interviewing for. I saw that there was a lot of money, and my response was, I can give the New York response because you're in New York. My response was, because by the time I'm 30, and I was 20 at the time, by the time I'm 30, I want a house in Kings Point, I want a Ferrari, and I want a boat. And if I don't get it, I'm quitting because I'm obviously in the wrong effing business. And I didn't use effing. And then I got up to leave, figuring I just cursed out this guy. And he looked at me and he said, you start on Monday.
Wow.
And 5 days later, I was working on a trading desk on Wall Street. Literally, still, I had to go out and buy my first suit to get my interview. Um, I bought a brown suit. That's how clueless I was. But I showed up, and I was quickly schooled in where to shop and how to speak, and got rid of my Queen's accent in 3 days, and then spent 4 years doing that, which was interesting.
Wow. Can you tell the high schoolers who don't know much about what the lifestyle is like on Wall Street? Can you tell, and other aside from Wolf of Wall Street, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you? Let's say your first year.
Yeah, so I worked on a trading desk that first year.
Hmm
So I was doing newish. I was doing IPOs. What was it like? It means that I sat down at a table, on a long table in a room full of many white men, facing each other,
hmm
and in front of me was 100 phone lines directly to other broker dealers around the world, that you would just hit the button and immediately talk to your counterpart at another firm. There was a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot of telling awful jokes, a lot of anti Semitism at the time. Um, just a ridiculous job. There was also, this was the early 80s on Wall Street. So there were also a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, a lot of everything. Um, but but it was a job that you went home from. You ate dinner, you went out with friends maybe for dinner, but you went home. You weren't traveling. You just got up early, went to a trading desk, and you had a much more normal life. And then when I was later after business school, and I was a banker and traveling.
Mhm.
But it's a very, very, very intense, high stress world, partially because, and this took me a long time. I know I'm giving you long answers here. This took me a very long time after I left Wall Street to understand. But on Wall Street, you were allowed to make zero mistakes. Zero mistakes.
Mhm.
The rest of the world, it seems you're allowed to make a mistake. But it took me a while because you were dealing with these giant numbers and money, and you weren't
Yeah.
allowed, you just couldn't make mistakes. It was mistakes could cost millions of dollars. So you had to be at the top of your game every single second.
Wow. It sounds very, very intense.
It
Um,
is, but
would you
fun
think, but fun. Yeah. Yeah.
if you like
Um,
that.
yeah. Some of the most intense things do bring the most fun, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, tell me, would you think that in now when you reflect back on your career thus far, do you think that working on Wall Street, would you say that it was more beneficial to your career? I mean, surely you wouldn't be in the position where you are now if it weren't your experience on Wall Street.
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I didn't like it, the trading desk. I mean, I did it, but I just felt I was just uh, wasting my time.
Hmm.
Um, so I actually wanted to work in the White House.
Hmm.
Uh, I thought that government was the job that people are supposed to have that are talented, and so uh, I applied to business school strictly so that I could go to Wall Street, to the White House. Um, but my I got married the summer between my first and second year of business school. My wife's second and third year of law school. She got her dream job in New York. I couldn't go to DC, and I didn't want to work in city government, so I took an investment banking job. But I graduated from Wharton in 1986 with
Hmm.
700 students, and 630 of us went to Wall Street that year. So it was
Wow.
a machine. 100 or something like 400 of my classmates got fired 2 years later during the crash. Um, but a year and a half later. But um, and then I became an investment banker, which is a very different job,
Hmm.
which is very different. So we were out pitching people who, governments, businesses who needed to raise money. And we were out pitching them to put the deal together to raise money. That job was way more intense than desk because it was 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I was traveling 3 to 4 days a week, and I was in 3 to 5 cities a week for another 14 years.
Wow.
Um, here is so I left there to go work at a homeless agency, run a homeless agency for 8 years.
Yeah. Let's talk
Before I
about.
became a professor.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I don't, I really don't think my Wall Street background helped me much. I think my Wall Street resume might have helped,
Hmm.
but I don't think my Wall Street experience helped. And there's one way, but we can talk about that later.
All right. I think we'll get to that later, but I'm thank you for bringing up what you did after Wall Street because I really want to get into that.
Sure.
It seems that like when everybody else zigged, and most people when they work on Wall Street, they work and they retire. If let's say the crash hadn't happened, but you zagged. You went the other way. You went into the nonprofit world, not just social entrepreneurship. Excuse me. Why did you do this? What was the motivation behind your thoughts? And you mentioned government earlier. Are these two things connected?
Absolutely. So here's the way I think about me.
Hmm.
I was born white male in America.
Yeah.
That continues to be a great um, uh, benefit to make life easier. I was born with parents who stayed together and very much valued education. My dad worked three jobs so that my brothers and I, well, one of my brothers and I could go to college, even at a state school. I was born with a high IQ. I was born with the ability to bullshit. And I was born with a set of looks that didn't make anybody throw up when they had lunch with me. Um, and none of those have I earned. What I added to it is extremely hard work, meaning I've yet to find in life the replacement for hard work. Um, but I found that if I worked really hard, because of those other things that I was born with that had nothing to do with me, I
Hmm.
was able to accomplish sort of whatever I wanted to. And I thought it was unfair that I would take all of that was God given, world given, whatever it is, coincidence, and not use it to make other people's lives better, but that like it was meant for me to be rich. Like that's what I was put on earth for. That's ridiculous. I had these skills, I had this stuff. Why am I not making, it was unfair that all of those advantages made me it easier for me to succeed. My goal was to make it so that wasn't true anymore. I wanted the world to be fairer than it was. And I was looking at a very unfair world.
That's uh, I admire that a lot. Um, I mean, kind of reminds me of this discussion that my English class in school, we always come back to this debate over if there's like a person with supernatural abilities, should they be able to, like, do they have the moral obligation to go out and help the world and create change? Or do they have, or should they not act as a vigilante? But yeah, I mean,
Where do you come out on that?
I think everyone has a moral obligation, and I think that, um, like me, for example, I'm like similar to you. I think I'm not a whore to look at, and I think that well, I'm a high schooler, and I think that I have this podcast so that I can help out those who are younger than me and don't really know where they want their career to take them, or don't really know what the future looks like. And it's important that they get a little taste of that. And as somebody who has met with some of the people that I've met with, like you, Adlai, I think that it's important that it's my duty as somebody in my position to try to better society. Very
Right.
similar to what you were saying.
Very similar to your dad, too.
Yeah. And I mean, and my mom, my
Oh, that's
mom,
right. Your mom, too, right?
yeah, my mom immigrated to this country. She went out and got it herself, left Iran at 14, came to America at 16, didn't speak the language, made a life for herself, graduated from Harvard. She's a boss, and she goes back and she helps out, and she didn't have to. She did it because she feels morally obligated. Um,
Got to be careful because when people are brought up in a world where we believe in service, we tend to migrate that way.
mhm. Adlai, I have a question for you. Is that why, after Chrysalis, is that why you decided to go on and start the social enterprise lab at Marshall? Because you wanted to, well, because I'm just going to assume here, you can tell me if I'm wrong, because you believe in social entrepreneurship and its ability to solve problems. Um, and you decided and you wanted to take that course of action. Is that why?
Um, I was being mentored by a guy who is considered to be one of the top leadership professors in the world. He passed away, but he's the guy who sort of created leadership as an academic discipline. And over the course of a couple of years, he asked me three questions while I was still at Chrysalis, the homeless agency. First question he asked is, what's the next problem you want to solve or work on? And I took a year thinking about it. And the problem that I wanted to solve was if you want, so I believe that heterogeneous groups always make better decisions than homogeneous groups.
Mhm.
Bunch of white guys are going to come up with the same decision. When we added women and people of color, it started getting more creative.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about academic disciplines. If we do our job in college, especially grad school, we're not teaching people facts and formulas. We're teaching them how do people in that academic discipline approach problems and analyze. Um, what I saw when I was working in homelessness is that not everybody, but most of the people who were working in that field came from public policy backgrounds or social work. And while those are critically important in the field, we need more disciplines at the table, more academic sort of frameworks.
Hmm.
So the one I knew was business.
Hmm.
So I wanted to bring business tools to the table, which
Hmm.
meant that I had to support, that when I said that, my mentor said, okay, so why does that problem exist? And it exists because if you went to a business school and said, I want to work on Wall Street, they have so much for you, classes and majors and professors and internships and clubs. And if you say you want to do marketing, but if you say I want to help fix K-12 education in America, they look at you and go, wrong building. Social work's over there and policy's over there. So I was like, well, if you're throwing people out, of course they're not doing it.
Hmm.
So my mentor asked the third question, which is, so what are you going to do about it? So I wrote a proposal, cold called 3 business school deans and said, let me come in and support students who might want to use a business education to solve social, environmental, and health access issues. And I got lucky that USC said yes as long as I raise all the money, which I did.
That's great. That's great. And I think that's more of you using your like, feeling morally obligated again. Yeah, that's very noble. Um, I my last interview was with Daniel Lubetsky, the CEO of Kind Snacks, and he's a big social entrepreneur. And I asked him this question towards the end of the interview. So it seems today, now more than ever, that like people like myself want to become entrepreneurs, whether it's to make money or solve problems. But the reality is that some 90 to 95% of startups fail. And I'm going to push you as this, as someone as a professor of social entrepreneurship here. In a time as vital as the present, do you really think that social entrepreneurship is the future and will solve problems? Because in this year, I've learned that with COVID, the importance of doctors, or with issues around the world, the importance of activists fighting for rights or global warming. And I mean, you said it before in the interview about being like a good leader in government, and with now current events in Ukraine, we see the importance of good leaders in our world. Um, just do you think that more social enterprise is really the path that the world should be taking, and that students should be taking?
That's a really good question. Um, I think everybody brings their skills to these issues in their own ways, and in
Hmm.
those ways that they feel more compelled and more skilled in. So my answer to yours is yes and yes and yes and yes, right? So government leadership we've seen be critical right now, especially. Uh, we've seen, advocacy remarkably important, and then people helping people on the ground.
Yeah.
What do I think? I think that government and traditional nonprofits that are begging for money
Hmm.
cannot are not sustainable and can never scale to the level of solving these problems because
Hmm.
it's just too costly. And I can't scale when all I'm doing is asking kind people to just give me money. And especially, look at what's going on in Ukraine. I'm giving money to Ukraine, and what does it have to do with, to rescue Ukrainian Jews? Actually, what does that have to do with me, right?
Yeah.
I work at a homeless agency. What does that have to do with me, right? I'm not getting any benefit from it. Right? So, and yet you're asking me to give money, and I will give money, but I'm not going to give. How much money will I give? So, the idea of what I'm looking at is, well, we know that business is sustainable, right? Meaning, a lot of businesses go out of business, like you said. But nonetheless, if I'm selling a product or a service to somebody that gives them a benefit, then I can assume that business will stay, right? So the only difference between what I do and what a traditional entrepreneur does is a traditional entrepreneur says, where's the market gap and how do I fill it? A social entrepreneur says, where is the social problem that I want to solve? And how might I create a product or a service that in and of itself addresses their problem, right? So your guy with Kind bars, right, with the Kind stuff, he said there's a problem of health, right? So he could have gone into government and done the Michelle Obama thing, right, of pushing kids to eat healthy. He could have become an advocate for healthy eating, right? He could have started a nonprofit, right, that made sure kids get fed and had access to healthy food, right? All of those were important and are important. But he said my skill set is best by developing a healthy food product that is affordable and that people want to eat.
Yeah.
So that they have these options. Yes, 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 and yes, right? None of those work without each other.
Yeah.
The question just becomes for you personally, where do you think, one, you think your skills fit best? And two, sort of where's your calling? For me, my calling when I went to Skid Row was I understand that poverty is a problem. I understand that homelessness is a problem. I could be working on solving homelessness or I could be helping homeless people. And I decided I wanted to help homeless people while other people worried about solving homelessness. Right? I said, I want to help Susan, who's homeless, because she's homeless right now and needs help.
Yeah.
But it was also very important that other people were working on making sure that we stop the flow of Susans into homelessness. So yes and yes and yes is the answer.
That's a great answer. None of the solutions to the world's problems work without each other, and I really like the way that you put it. Saying like we need those advocates, we need those people in government, and we need we need more, and we need like our leaders, and we need social entrepreneurs.
Right.
And like the sustainability behind entrepreneurship and behind a business, because you don't have to ask the government for money. And it really like that was not the answer I was expecting to hear, and I'm very glad that you're out here and you're going to share that you're sharing this with us. So last question before we close out, Adlai. As the professor of a university, and on behalf of all of our viewers, what would you say is the most important skill for high schoolers to be developing? We've talked a lot about purpose and the significance behind purpose in this interview. Maybe do you think it's that? Do you think it's something else? What should high schoolers be developing?
I think that what high schoolers should be developing is the ability to think for themselves. Meaning, and what I mean there is, the world wants to define success for you. The world wants to tell you that success is a fancy college. The world wants to tell you that success is a high-paying job. And for some people, all of that is true. But the deep question is, can you start to think about what is actually success for you? And not be a person who's just going through life feeling like, everybody else tells me I'm supposed to get a high paying job, so my entire life is built around that. Do you want a high paying job? Is that something you think you want? The
Yeah.
other is, and if so, why? Just money is not a good reason. Um, the other is really try not to make everything you do about the next thing, setting yourself up for the next thing. Just try to live a life and have fun and do some things for no other reason.
Hey, Adlai.
I think I lost